together in one photograph, and at the center of what's claimed to be a major international sex abuse scandal. Prince Andrew, who denies any wrongdoing. Virginia Roberts, then aged 17, who claims she's a victim. Ghislaine Maxwell, now facing 6 criminal charges. And behind the flash, said to be taking the picture, convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. In this program, experts in body language, linguistics, and forensic psychology examine the guilty, the accused, and the accusers, what they say and how they say it.
I would like to answer that question. I really would.
The Watcher.
I am an expert in behavior analysis. I've been working for 30 years in high-stake contexts with military, intelligence and police organizations.
I'm at a loss to explain this particular photograph.
Rapid blinking when he's making these statements, head shake nose when he's making the statement. This starts to cluster to make the points of interest into an area that needs further investigation.
The Listener.
I'm a linguistics professor and I specialise in the language of communication.
It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life.
The significant bit for me is that genuine emotion's triggered by Ghislaine. Why? What's her involvement?
And The Profiler.
I'm a consultant forensic psychologist. For 25 years, I've interviewed perpetrators of crime, including sexual crime, and their victims.
A friend of defendant Epstein sent him 3 12-year-old girls from France who spoke no English for defendant to sexually exploit and abuse.
There's a real arrogance, a really unpleasant arrogance to Jeffrey Epstein. He quite dismissively points at a lawyer as if to say, right, this is your job, step up and do it.
Maxwell had a personal and professional relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
By his own admission, Andrew is a close friend of Ghislaine Maxwell.
People will wonder if he was that close to Ghislaine Maxwell. Did he not know that this was going on?
Ghislaine Maxwell has now been charged in the United States after her arrest by the FBI.
She's accused of enticing young girls to travel and take part in group sex.
Tonight, she appeared in court charged with being complicit in some of Epstein's crimes against underage girls.
American prosecutors allege that Ghislaine was absolutely instrumental in finding these girls and befriending them. She introduced them to Epstein, and then together they started to sexually abuse these girls. It seems that it started out with a massage, which quickly became a sexualized massage, and eventually it would evolve into them raping these girls or sexually assaulting them together. This wasn't just Epstein acting on his own. Ghislaine Maxwell was absolutely integral to this.
Ghislaine Maxwell pleads not guilty to all charges. Almost 30 years earlier, the story begins in the Atlantic Ocean, when controversial newspaper tycoon Robert Maxwell commits suicide.
He had 9 children, but apparently Ghislaine was his favourite. Now, when his crimes caught up with him, he chose to take his own life. And the yacht that he jumped from was called the Lady Ghislaine.
I want to take this opportunity to thank all the many hundreds of people who have sent messages of support to us at this very, very sad time.
Immediately, Ghislaine Maxwell went to New York. There, she met a wheeler dealer seemingly at home with presidents and princes.
Jeffrey Epstein's life is a real rags to riches story. He actually comes from very humble beginnings. but yet he became an incredibly successful financier, and his list of friends was like a who's who of everybody very rich and powerful in the world. I can see how Ghislaine would be attracted to Epstein at a time when she's really just lost her father. She might want the protection of another powerful man. So they become lovers, and according to him, she was his best friend.
Maxwell would become the key figure in Epstein's empire.
He's got the money, she's got the connections, so together they're a very powerful team. They're quite formidable, but behind this story is another much seedier, darker story.
Starting in 1994 until at least 1997, Maxwell had a personal and professional relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old.
Ghislaine Maxwell had known Prince Andrew for 20 years. She introduced him to Jeffrey Epstein, and in December 2000, all three met at a special location.
Epstein is invited into the very heart of the royal family. They go to Sandringham Estate. Now, according to Andrew, this was a straightforward shooting weekend. The question is anything straightforward where Jeffrey Epstein's concerned?
Three months later, Maxwell and Epstein jetted into London to visit the prince, bringing a young woman, Virginia Roberts. What happened during this visit? For years, there have been claims that aged 17, Virginia Roberts was trafficked to Britain for sex with Prince Andrew. In November 2019, he took the bold step of publicly answering the accusations.
Prince Andrew is to appear on the BBC's Newsnight programme. The prince is under pressure to explain his relationship.
It's often said that the royals live by a motto of never complain, never explain. So this is a real departure for Prince Andrew, and I think it shows that he's really feeling the weight of the public and the media scrutiny that he's under.
Whether or not that famous 2001 photograph is a fake proved to be one of the most memorable exchanges.
She provided a photo of the two of you together.
Yes.
Your arm was around her waist.
Yes.
You've seen the photo?
I've seen the photograph.
So here we see three positive nods, big nods, about the claims being made. He's just acknowledging the question as we go through. However, as he moves towards the end of the question here, we get three blinks coming together, which is almost an eye closure. We blink once every 20 seconds to lubricate the eyeball. That's all we need. But when this level of blinking happens, and some of it borders on a closure, more than a quarter of a second, this suggests he's thinking hard. We call this cognitive load.
I'm at a loss to explain this particular photograph.
So, not making a direct denial when you know it to be untrue is a point of interest that we pay attention to. When that's supported with two or three other indicators, like rapid blinking when he's making these statements, head shake nose when he's making the statement, then this starts to cluster to make the points of interest into an area that needs further investigation.
Your friend suggested that the photo is fake.
I think it's, from the investigations that we've done, you can't prove whether or not that photograph is faked or not, because it is a photograph of a photograph of a photograph.
What we can also pay attention to is his deliberate delivery. He slows down, but he then quickens in speed as well when he talks about a photograph of a photograph of a photograph in order to make light of it.
So it's very difficult to be able to prove it, but I don't remember that photograph ever being taken.
There's a repetition of proof, there's increased eye blinks when he talks about proving, there's a swallow, all of which are indicators of stress, that he's finding this a difficult topic. I don't remember that photograph being taken, isn't the same as claiming it's a fake. And so he's doing everything he can to move away from having to answer directly whether that photograph's a fake.
In a separate programme, Virginia Roberts was interviewed and was passionate in her claim that the photo is not a fake.
I think the world is getting sick of these ridiculous excuses. It's a real photo. I've given it to the FBI for their investigation, and it's an authentic photo. There's a date on the back of it from when it was printed. It's a real photo.
She said it's a real photograph. Her head movements and her eyes are focused. There's no swallowing, there's no head nods, there's no shoulder shrugs. So this is fairly convincing.
Her delivery is very, very emphatic and very clear when she talks about the photo. So all the suggestions from her language, at least, is that that photo is genuine.
I can't see any obvious manipulation with this photograph. And it's been in circulation for a number of years before Prince Andrew started to speculate that it was a fake. Now, I say we can radiocarbon date the Turin shroud. I'm sure that FBI experts can look at the original photograph rather than, as Andrew says, look at a copy of a copy of a copy and pinpoint exactly whether it's fake or not. But what it does do is it raises eyebrows and it raises questions. Why on earth have we got a billionaire, an heiress and a prince in the company of a 17-year-old girl from a very troubled background and in such a private, personal setting at night? There's a really clear power differential between her and the rest of the people there. Why was she there? And more crucially, what did Prince Andrew believe she was there for the purposes of?
What kind of contact, if any, had there been between Prince Andrew and Virginia Roberts? The answer was less clear to our experts. Here is the strong claim by Virginia Roberts in a BBC interview.
All told, how many times did you have sex in the circumstances that you describe with Prince Andrew?
There was 3 times.
And where was that?
Gillen's townhouse in London, Jeffrey's mansion in New York, and Jeffrey's Island in the Caribbean.
We've got to be careful because at the core of this is the conversation around sex, having sex 3 times. Language is key. So how is Virginia interpreting sex when she's describing it in her claim? And how is Prince Andrew describing sex when he is defending and denying against the claim?
Do you recall any kind of sexual contact with Virginia Roberts then
None,
or any other time?
None whatsoever.
Where we see consistency with Prince Andrew is his denials about having sex 3 times with Virginia. His language, his tone, his behaviour was consistent, but we have to be clear about what he means by sex. And in the dictionary, sex is physical contact, which includes sexual intercourse. So physical contact could be massage. Was it just massage services? Was it massage plus? Or was it something more intimate? And that's the crux of this clash between the claim and the counterclaim between these 2 individuals. It could be a linguistic interpretation issue.
For our experts, Virginia Roberts' recollections in this controversial interview didn't resolve the issue.
It didn't last very long, the whole entire procedure. It was disgusting. He wasn't mean or anything, but he got up and he said thanks and walked out, and I sat there in bed just horrified and ashamed and felt dirty, and I had to get up and go have a shower.
There is no doubt of the pain and the trauma that she's been subjected to under the management of Epstein. The story, the body language, the face and the emotion is consistent with that. I have no doubt. However, there are inconsistencies when Virginia's relaying the story about the sex act. We see an eye closure, longer than a quarter of a second. We see a single-sided shoulder shrug, and we see a micro head shake no. So she's making positive statements about it didn't last very long. We don't know what it is.
In Virginia Roberts' interview, our experts noted that when recalling events after she claimed to have had sex with Prince Andrew, it was the mention of Ghislaine Maxwell that moved her to tears.
I had to get up and go have a shower, and the next day, Ghislaine tells me I did a really good job. She pats me on the back and said, "You made him really happy." It was a wicked time in my life. It was a really scary time in my life.
It's very easy to connect that emotional state. It's genuine sadness. We can see it with the brows, we can see it with the mouth, and she's got a full, engaged, sad expression, and it results in tears. So we know she's in a sad state. That's genuine. But the sadness seems to be triggered by a transition that she makes from describing the sex acts to then focusing on Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine tells me I did a really good job. She pats me on the back and said, "You made him really happy."
So there's something going on here which is worthy of further investigation. Is the real pain here to do with the betrayal of a female who was working almost like as a madam and an organizer for the massage services?
The significant bit for me is that genuine emotion's triggered by Ghislaine. Why? What's her involvement?
It seems that she feels really betrayed, angry, hurt by this woman. And from all accounts, she wasn't very pleasant to these girls. So is it that she took them in for these ulterior motives, betrayed their trust, and then was the madam of the outfit?
In court statements from 2016, released late 2020, Maxwell denies Roberts' allegations and seemingly those related to Andrew. Though Prince Andrew faced many questions, our experts were surprised that occasionally he seemed unable to provide direct answers.
She made these claims in a US deposition.
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying you don't believe her? She's lying?
That's a very difficult thing to answer, because I'm not in a position to know what she's trying to achieve, but I can tell you categorically, I don't remember meeting her at all.
Rather than answering the question, are you saying you don't believe her, she's lying, using a yes or a no, he uses evasion. That's a very difficult thing to answer, is claiming an inability to answer. So he avoids confirming that Virginia is a liar, and that could be for multiple reasons.
Prince Andrew was confronted with details of Virginia Roberts' allegations.
Your response?
I have no recollection of ever meeting this lady. None whatsoever.
You don't remember meeting her?
No.
She says she met you in 2001. She dined with you. She danced with you. You bought her drinks. You were in Tramp nightclub in London. And she went on to have sex with you in a house in Belgravia belonging to Ghislaine Maxwell.
Didn't happen.
What is worth paying attention to is the didn't happen. And he holds the gaze, but the fact that there's a pronoun missing allows for us to ask, well, what didn't happen? Is it all of it didn't happen, which is probably what he wanted to signal, or did some of it happen and other things not happen? This wasn't as strong a denial as it might have been.
What we don't know is this response only to the sex act, or is it a response to the whole thing? He says
didn't happen.
And the gesture of the head movement is synchronized with the words. So whatever it is, didn't happen. But was that just the last part of the question, or was it the whole thing? This needs further investigation.
Do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her.
And that's not helped by the fact that when asked, do you remember her, he talks about having no recollection again. People who are being truthful aren't scared of saying that they can't remember everything. Unfortunately for Prince Andrew, he does it so many times, it comes across as very weak in his interview.
No, I've never met Virginia Roberts would be more plausible and more in keeping with truth-telling. Now, the thing is, just because you don't recall something, and he uses that language a lot, I don't remember, I don't recall, it doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Prince Andrew's surprising account of where he had been on the date in question became a major talking point.
You know that you were at home with the children. Was it a memorable night?
On that particular day...
When the anxiety increases in our body, we get muscle tension, the lifting of the foot. So the tension of the muscles lifts the toe. We have a little bit of manipulating action coming from his fingers, so there's two indicators from his body suggesting there's a lot going on right now. Maybe cognitive load, he's thinking hard.
I was at home, I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at, I suppose, sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Now, his statements seem positive, but they also seem well-rehearsed and very linear. But the statement that he was at the Pizza Express around about 4 or 5 o'clock is not really an alibi for what happened in the early hours or late at night in Tramp nightclub.
And then, because the Duchess was away, we have a simple rule in the family that when one's away, the other one's there. I was on terminal leave at the time from the Royal Navy, so therefore I was at home.
So if it could be verified that on that evening he was supervising the children in the evening and overnight, then that would be a good alibi.
Virginia's already made the comment that she could be wrong on the dates.
Strongly challenged over inconsistencies, Virginia Roberts openly admitted making mistakes.
So yeah, you know, I might be wrong on dates, absolutely. I might be wrong on places even sometimes.
And so it's not about a specific date necessarily, it's about whether they ever met at all, and having met or not, what kind of contact was there between the two of them.
I think from a psychological perspective, he wants us to know that he was in Pizza Express in Woking. Look, despite the blue blood, he's just like one of us. He is also forced to go to children's parties at Pizza Express and is willing to do so. So I think it's an attempt at having the common touch, but it falls a bit flat because there are many different examples of where his superiority and, dare I say, arrogance slips through during the interview.
Jeffrey Epstein went to jail just before 10 this morning. He pleaded guilty in open court.
It had been 7 years since Jeffrey Epstein's trip to London to see Prince Andrew. Now, for crimes committed earlier, he was jailed in Palm Beach, Florida.
It's been established beyond a doubt that Jeffrey Epstein was a paedophile.
What was the crime of which you were convicted?
Two counts, one soliciting prostitution and procuring a minor for prostitution.
Now, what that actually means is he had sex with a 14-year-old girl. That's rape of a child.
He served just 13 months, but on release faced a series of civil actions from other women who claimed he'd abused them.
Could you please give us your name?
Jeffrey Epstein.
Cameras recorded preliminary hearings, and our team has watched the footage.
On one of defendant Epstein's birthdays, a friend of defendant Epstein sent him 3 12-year-old girls from France who spoke no English for defendant to sexually exploit and abuse.
At the point the 3 12-year-old girls is mentioned, we see a head turn away from the interviewer, an eye closure, the right lip lifts, nothing else is happening on the mouth. This is contempt. It's moving the corner of the mouth towards the centre of the cheek. Contempt towards the question. In addition, we get this head shake no, and he turns to his defence team and he mouths the word nope. And what we get from his body language is a very slight hand roll of his right hand. It's very difficult to see, but if you look at his sleeve on the left-hand side of the screen, under his left hand, you'll see the arm raising. But the clues from his shirt here are that we're getting a single-sided hand shrug. That is strong evidence that the body and the thinking and the feeling is contradicting the response. So this tells us that there's no confidence in his head shake no.
I would like to answer that question. I really would.
He's smiling throughout and he's nodding his head throughout. And you can almost hear the but is coming. But in his case, he decides to use a however.
However, today, my attorneys have told me I have to assert my Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, and 14th Amendment rights of the U.S. Constitution.
So he's, if you like, hiding behind the amendment. He has no intention of answering the question.
I would like to answer that question. I really would.
We even see him smiling as he gives his first, I would like to answer that question, I really would. It's an odd thing to be enjoying, though, isn't it, when you think about what he's facing? And it's a very odd thing to be enjoying if you're facing the kind of allegations he was, including that minor girls should be offered as a birthday present.
Accordingly, then, I assert my Fifth, Sixth, and 14th Amendment right to the United States Constitution.
So we get a look away and we get a movement across the nose. The stress of not being able to respond is creating an increase in blood flow. The small capillaries, which are mainly in the cheeks and the nose, the walls of the veins are 1 cell thick. And so when blood pressure increases, not only does it show with the redness, but you can feel it. You'll see an increase in redness from the left picture, which is the baseline skin tone from earlier on in the deposition, to the hot spot now where we're being queried on 14-year-old girls. So this is not embarrassment or blushing. This is a redness that's created by stress.
Do you know Virginia Roberts? So she's again who?
A simple question that exposed Epstein's deception.
So the first thing we notice is a combination of an in-breath and a crease between his brows. We also see some rapid blinking, 3-4 blinks in rapid succession at the same time. So this is a good indication of cognitive load or thinking hard. He buys himself 24 seconds with some ridiculous questions that he knows the answers to.
Can you spell it? Common spelling, Virginia. Like the state, can you spell it for me, please? Roberts. What's the last name? How's it spelled? Roberts.
He's attacking the questioner by repeating his question to him. I've told you, I want you to spell it, so can you spell it? And it's almost an instruction. He's bringing liquid to his mouth to try and handle the stress and anxiety because he can't carry on this saga much longer than 24 seconds. He's known Virginia Roberts for 10 years. He took her to London 10 years ago on that now famous trip. And the two words Virginia Roberts are not difficult to spell. So when you combine this anxiety with the other indicators, this would suggest that he's faking it.
In his interview, recorded before Ghislaine Maxwell's arrest, Prince Andrew appeared anxious to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein.
We weren't that close, so therefore, I mean, yes, I would go and stay in his house, but that was because of his girlfriend, not because of him.
Prince Andrew has done everything that he can to distance himself from Epstein during this interview. The important relationship was always with Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, that's not the story that's being told by these photographs.
Photographed deep in conversation, 17 months after Epstein's release from jail, the prince stayed at his New York mansion for 4 days.
The photograph shows two men who seem to be locked in conversation and very comfortable in each other's company. I would say that at that point, Prince Andrew was far more comfortable with Epstein than he is at the moment with the very mention of even Epstein's name.
Bluntly, he was asked to explain, and gave a tortured insight into how difficult it was.
Now, I went there with the sole purpose of saying to him that because he had been convicted, it was inappropriate for us to be seen together. And I had a number of people counsel me in both directions, either to go and see him or not to go and see him. And I took the judgment call that because this was serious, and I felt that doing it over the telephone was the chicken's way of doing it. I had to go and see him and talk to him.
That suggests to me that if somebody's going to take those steps to do that, that must have been an important, significant relationship between the two. You don't travel to New York to break off with somebody that's actually insignificant.
It is a long way to go. And he also spent quite a few days there. Was it a sign that his relationship was closer than even he realises?
Just how much of Jeffrey Epstein's activities were known to Prince Andrew formed a key part of his interview.
We now know that he was and had been procuring young girls for sex trafficking.
We now know that. At the time, there was no indication to me or anybody else that that was what he was doing. And certainly, when I saw him either in the United States, when I saw him in the United States, or when I was staying in his houses in the United States, there was no indication, absolutely no indication.
A few interesting things here. The mention of United States actually dismisses the other venues as well. We have one in London where one of the claims is about the sex acts.
The fact that for some reason Prince Andrew has moved on to the United States could arguably be what we call an exclusion qualifier. Why are we happy to talk about the United States? Why are we providing additional information that's not part of the question that was asked? Especially because we also see stress indicators at this point.
There was no indication, absolutely no indication.
We get a 1 second eye closure, not a blink. A blink lasts for less than a quarter of a second. I'm progressing this frame by frame, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 1, 2, 3. That's 32 frames, which is over a second, and he's squeezing his eyes and closing himself off from that statement, and we get a lip lick. When we move into a stress response, our digestion system stops. Our resources go to our other organs that we need to handle the threat. And that digestion system closes off the salivation, and then that also dries the mouth out. And so we often hear swallows or licking of the lips.
You have to remember that at the time, I was patron of the NSPCC's Full Stop campaign, so I was close up with what was going on in those time about getting rid of abuse to children. So I knew what the things were to look for, but I never saw them.
He's trying to tell us that he would have seen it. He knew enough that if he had seen any of the signs, he would have known what those signs were and would have done something about them. And then it's very clear when he says, "But I never saw them."
The interviewer relentlessly pursued Prince Andrew on this point. He resolutely defended his position.
Virginia Roberts' legal team says you could not spend time around Epstein and not know what was going on. You could not spend time around Epstein and not know what was going on.
If you are somebody like me, then people behave in a subtly different way. You wouldn't... First of all, I'm not looking for it. That's the thing. If you're looking for it, then you might have suspected now, with the benefit of a huge amount of hindsight and a huge amount of analysis, you look back and you go, well, was that really the way that it was, or was I looking at it the wrong way?
This is a question that's pretty tricky for him, so there's an intake of breath.
You could not spend time around Epstein and not know what was going on.
He's really thinking hard. He's thinking about how to answer this. What we have is a slowed delivery.
If you are somebody like me.
He's been very, very careful with his voice, with his words, with his delivery. We also get increased eye blinks when he talks about he's not looking for it. He emphasises certain words, and his voice changes.
You look back and you go, well, was that really the way that it was, or was I looking at it the wrong way?
He's trying to make sense of it, and did he miss things as well? And so from all of this, the important message he wants us to take away from this is that he genuinely didn't see anything.
Pressed hard about whether he should have visited a known sex offender, Prince Andrew answered frankly.
It was definitely the wrong thing to do. But at the time, I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do, and I admit fully that my judgment was probably coloured by my tendency to be too honourable, but that's just the way it is.
So what we see and what we hear during his account is consistent nods with his words. And they're reinforcing the message. They're synchronized. They're gestures which happen at the same time as the words. That gives us confidence that this is a true statement.
There's evidence throughout, especially his self-references, that Prince Andrew does value doing the honourable thing.
I felt it was the honourable and right thing to do.
And we know that emotiveness is associated with truth indicators, is probably telling us that when Prince Andrew talks about doing the honourable thing, in his head it's actually really, really important.
The American financier Jeffrey Epstein has been found dead in his prison cell.
5 weeks after being arrested again, this time on sex trafficking charges, in July 2019, Jeffrey Epstein was found hanging in his cell. The coroner ruled it suicide. The investigation immediately switched to his friends and associates. A year later, a sensational development.
Good morning. My name is Audrey Strauss. I'm the acting United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York. Today we announced charges against Ghislaine Maxwell for helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually exploit and abuse multiple minor girls from the period of 1994 through 1997. Maxwell has been taken into custody early this morning in New Hampshire.
Our experts studied the prosecutor's statement.
Maxwell had a personal and professional relationship.
This is a very, very powerful piece of theatre.
Maxwell was among Epstein's closest associates and helped him exploit girls who were as young as 14 years old.
She delivers that 14 years old. You can sense. that there's some emotion in Audrey Strauss's voice. And we also see a pause after this and a swallow that would suggest a level of emotion there.
Who were as young as 14 years old.
She's gripping the lectern. So for most of the speech, she's collected and speaking from behind the lectern. But at this point, she's grabbed the side of the lectern to try and stabilise herself, maybe. So the anger is depicted by the brows coming in and the eye glare. And the disgust is indicated by the rising of this top lip towards the muscle anchorage point, which is here by the nose. Very reliable, very hard to do voluntarily when you're not feeling disgusted.
The Deputy Director of the FBI also weighed in with a personal attack on Ghislaine Maxwell.
More recently, we learned she had slithered away to a gorgeous property in New Hampshire, continuing to live a life of privilege while her victims live with the trauma inflicted upon them years ago.
He's talking about a metaphor slithered away that we associate with animals, and animals that we tend not to like snakes. This is making her appear animal-like, making her appear as though she's created chaos, moved away from that chaos to continue her life of privilege. And he's very careful to parallel that life of privilege that she has against the life that she left the victims in.
If you speak to the girls who have made complaints, then they say that she played an integral part in introducing them, not only to Jeffrey Epstein, but other members of their social circle, for very nefarious reasons.
Ghislaine Maxwell pleads not guilty to all charges, but her arrest means more questions for Prince Andrew.
By his own admission, Andrew is a close friend of Ghislaine Maxwell.
Well, I met through his girlfriend back in 1999, and I'd known her since she was at university in the UK. Remember that it was his girlfriend that was the key element in this.
In associating himself so strongly with Ghislaine, then Prince Andrew making it obvious he's so close to Ghislaine may well become a problem for him later on.
Yes, I would go and stay in his house, but that was because of his girlfriend, not because of him.
People will wonder if he was that close to Ghislaine Maxwell, did he not know that this was going on?
I'm not going to comment on anyone's status in this investigation, but I will say that we would welcome Prince Andrew coming in to talk with us. We would like to have the benefit of his statement.
Prince Andrew's lawyers say he has offered to help on 3 occasions. In his interview, he was asked directly if he would travel to America to meet prosecutors.
Well, I'm like everybody else, and I would have to take all the legal advice that there was before I was to do that sort of thing. But if push came to shove and the legal advice was to do so, then I would be duty-bound to do so.
His behaviour is consistent with the words. So we've got confidence that his willingness to support and cooperate with the authorities is positive and true. But the only way to get to the truth with this case is through good police investigation.
I think, given this is not going to disappear anytime soon, there are positives for Prince Andrew talking with members of the FBI, because I think at the minute there's a feeling that he's not cooperating, and then that becomes also problematic. I don't think the story will disappear unless he talks.
What I would really like to see is him talking not to Newsnight, but prioritising efforts to go and talk to the prosecutors who are investigating Jeffrey Epstein's criminal behaviours, because that's the important thing here. Now, Virginia Roberts, I don't know if she's had sex with Prince Andrew or whether she's met him even, although I do think there's good evidence that she has. She's been making these complaints since 2014, and she deserves to have these complaints fully and fairly investigated. But I think he's morally bound as well to go and help out as much as he possibly can with this investigation into what is a huge, huge scandal with a huge number of victims and potential victims. So he should be on the first plane out to the USA.
From the 9-1, switch that over, that's the young blonde. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Shawty wanna